All right. So, question of the day is it's a really cool one, and I would love to talk with you about it if you were here in person. So, let's just imagine for a second that you're here at my front porch, and I see you, and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going, man? Have a seat." And then you come and you sit down in this rocking chair next to me, and we're just having a conversation. And we're like, "Hey, man, so what do you do for work?" And then you tell me you do this and that. And you work at Walmart, you work at the college, whatever you do. And then you ask back, and I'm like, that's really cool. Thanks for telling me. And how long? And then you ask back to me, what do you do for work? And then I would say, well, I help Joe Westone with remodeling work, but I also work as a mentor, helping people overcome addictions and get better self mastery. The work I do for that gets me pretty fired up. And then you might say, I bet. I mean, how did you get into that? And then I would say, well, I have my own story with addiction. Since I was like 11 years old, I had a really big problem with addiction to pornography. And after trying to beat it for many years unsuccessfully, with on my own and with religious leaders, and even with some confiding with my family, I did finally get teamed up with a good therapist and a good program that helped me get going. And I know So after going through that, I know how much people need help these days with so many destructive habits that you can fall into. And I also see a huge gap in the services that offer to fill that need. So I'm pretty passionate about it. Can I tell you a little bit about what I do? And at that point, you might say, "And I've heard enough," and you walk off. But let's just imagine that you say, "Well, absolutely, that sounds interesting. Tell me more." So then I would say, "Well, as a personal warrior trainer, is what that's the title that they call me in the organization I work for. You could also say mentor, life coach, personal development trainer, healthy habits trainer. I don't like those titles though because it makes it sound a little bit, I don't want to say scammy, but personal warrior trainer. I help men specifically and young men seeking better self mastery to create space from destructive behaviors and beliefs, to refocus on their values and build passion in their lives for becoming the person they want to be. And all of this within a Christian worldview, assuming that you have similar views on God and the commandments and the role of the Holy Ghost and of the adversary in our lives. Now, what does that look like? So, for a typical client, we meet 30 minutes once a week with a distraction-free place and time. Typically, most of my clients are over Zoom or over the phone because don't have as many in person. And I ask them to bring their notebook, their journal, so they can report their score from the previous week and write down their plans. And we'll start off by free sparring, which is basically practicing responding to common attacks, practicing responding to common lies or limiting beliefs that the adversary uses in various scenarios. We started off pretty generic just to kind of get warmed up. I'll say, "Why are you fighting?" And you tell me your reasons for fighting to become the person you want to be, for keeping those goals, those habits that we set. And then we report on the score from the previous week for all the daily goals. Then we report on the plans. I'll get them to report on their plans, reflecting on their victories and also on hard battles that they fought and identifying attacks and break used by the adversary and breaking them down to see what's going on. And then we'll discover truths and battle strategies to use for upcoming battles and put it together into a plan for the next week. And after that, we will spar again in more of a positional sparring kind of form where we're practicing responding to those attacks, anticipated attacks using the plan that we developed. And I love doing this kind of thing. So I'll have to give you another example another time. Um, but basically, like, let's say someone commonly gets attacked when they wake up in the morning, like struggling to wake up on time and get up out of bed and get going. I'll have them if we're on Zoom or something, and they can move their camera, I'll have them actually go into their bedroom and practice getting up out of bed, and then I will stand in as the adversary and say something like, "Hey man, just go back to bed for hit the snooze, go back to bed for 10 more minutes." And then they can practice responding by saying why they fight and then getting up and going to do the next thing on their drill, which could be splashing water in their face, it could be getting some food, whatever it is. And then I'll have them practice that at least like one to five more times. And it's really, really cool, and it's really effective too. So along with that, I'll have them practice those drills we develop multiple times every day on their own and keep in touch with me. A lot of them will keep in touch with me, texting me for accountability or feedback or a sounding board, or even give me like short little calls or voicemails if I can't answer. And we just work together and week by week work on strategies to help them to do those three things: create space, build, refocus, and build passion. And then at that point, you might say, wow, hopefully at least you would say, wow, that sounds really cool and really needed. And then I would say, yeah, man, I love doing this. It's incredibly fulfilling, helps me to stay in the fight. And I know it can kind of seem like a little strange to some people. Most people, I mean, who trains for getting up out of bed on time or training to have good habits, who practices those things? But we live in a world increasingly in need of guidance when it comes to living a life of intention. There's so many ways that we can just fall into patterns of numbing out and mediocrity, laziness, living below our potential, living below the happy and fulfilling life that we're intended for. I believe that God has sent us here with a work for each of us to do individually. And if we're too distracted by addictions and numbing behaviors and media, we may not be able to fulfill that work as well as we could. So yeah, I want to help people to build that passion in their life. So I love it. Anyways, thanks for letting me tell you about that. I will hopefully be able to keep in touch with you. And if you know anybody who needs this kind of thing, or if you want to have a free call with me just to chat about this kind of stuff, I'd love to talk with you about it. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.